Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Animals in People Clothes. Let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome, everybody, to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Over There, Private Tony. The new film on the tip of everyone's tongue. Go see it. Over There, Private Tony. In theaters now. Welcome, everyone, to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're filmmakers. We're your hosts on this jungle cruise. Keep your arms and legs on the inside at all times, and be sure. And we are filmmakers. We like to watch movies and analyze them. Sometimes they're better than others. Sometimes they're the best movie ever. Sometimes we regret making the decision that we did. But you can't always know what you're getting into. That's kind of the fun thing. Like picking a movie, letting it play, and seeing what happens. As a movie fan, that's really fun. It's much better than like a song, because you might hear a great song, but it starts and ends really, really fast. A great movie, you may not know it's great until 2 hours in, and suddenly it's like, I can't believe this is a movie. And the feelings, and you're being overwhelmed. And so just letting a movie kind of come to you and do its thing, I think is always a bit of a magical experience. And I don't know, one that you can't really replicate too often in life, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the best movies are the at least for me, the best films are the sleepers that I don't expect either to like it, or I don't know what it is, what I'm going to get going in. And then as it goes, it's pulling me with it, and I don't know where we're going. And then, you look back on it and you think, wow, that was fantastic. I love those experiences. Just catches you off guard. And I feel like only films can do that. Music isn't the best at that. You kind of identify with a song right off the bat, usually. Maybe sometimes a record will do that, like a full album. Like Nick Drake's Pink Moon did that for me. The first time I heard that record, I didn't know what I was listening to for most of it. And then after I listened to it, I thought, wow, that's incredible. And then I had no idea. The first time I heard it was in 2004, and I thought it had just been made. And it's from the 60s. That record's from the 60s. And so, but I didn't know that. So I didn't know what to think until after it was over. But a song, yeah, not really. I feel like really good films do that really well.
It's nice to just, like you said, you get sucked in, and before you know it, you're just having an amazing time. It's a bit of a journey. And of course, speaking of journeys, what are we covering today, man?
Right into it. I love it. Today we are covering Stand By Me, the old classic. So if you haven't seen this film, please pause this episode and go watch it, because we are going to spoil a bunch of stuff. Stuff that I think would affect how you watch the film, just because I didn't remember anything going into this movie. In fact, I don't even think I'd seen it all the way through. So I'm glad I knew next to nothing. So
yeah, that's a great point, because you don't really know what's going to happen along the way, especially at the end. Good call. And we'll talk about a handful of things. Some of the cinematography, rule of thirds. I haven't really talked about rule of thirds on here very much, and it may not be a very satisfying discussion to be sure, but this is going to be my opinion on rule of thirds, as well as some of the story and writing, coming of age stories, friendship, facing your own mortality, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film: a writer recounts a childhood journey with his friends to find the body of a missing boy. It's directed by Rob Reiner. Screenplay by Raynold, Gideon, and Bruce A. Evans. Based on the novella by Stephen King. Cinematography by Thomas Del Ruth. Featuring Will Wheaton as Gordie Lachance, River Phoenix as Chris Chambers, Corey Feldman as Teddy Duchamp, Jerry O'Connell as Vern, Kiefer Sutherland as Ace, John Cusack as Denny Lachance, and Richard Dreyfuss as the writer. What a cast.
You could be a real writer someday, Gordie.
Fuck writing. I don't want to be a writer. It's stupid. It's a stupid waste of time.
That's your dad talking.
Bullshit.
Bull true. I know how your dad feels about you. He doesn't give a shit about you. Denny was the one he cared about, and don't try to tell me different. You're just a kid, Gordie.
Oh, gee, thanks, Dad.
Wish the hell I was your dad. You wouldn't be going around talking about taking these stupid shop courses if I was. It's like God gave you something, man. All those stories that you can make up. And he said, this is what we got for you, kid. Try not to lose it. But kids lose everything unless there's someone there to look out for them. And if your parents are too fucked up to do it, then maybe I should.
Bro, so first time going all the way through this, I am curious because for me, this is like one of the most West movies ever made as far as like my childhood, where it came. So I don't think I have any partiality in me. Like it's zero objective truths coming from me on this episode. But for you, this is a fresh viewing as an adult, having seen 1,000 movies, half of them inspired by this one. And so it's tough, I think, sometimes to watch a film that created all the cliches. Anyway, what was your experience in this thing? Does it hold up, or maybe not?
100%. This movie is incredible. Sorry, I got a echo going on.
From you?
From me.
Okay.
Oh, it's gone now.
Oh.
I don't know. Whatever. Yeah, no, this movie is incredible in all the ways. There's nothing I would change. It's absolutely flawless and perfect. The writing is amazing. They don't hold back with the kids. They write adult, not just cursing, but adult conversation for the children. They don't dumb them down because they're kids. They treat them like individual people. And I love it. I absolutely love it. Man, we lost an incredible talent with River Phoenix. I mean, was this his first film?
I don't think so, but it was certainly his biggest headliner.
Oh my God. Just the way, not just the delivery of his lines, but his crying and his determination, when he's standing up to Ace and all of these things, just so good. And all of them just fantastic. Corey Feldman is amazing in this film. Will Wheaton is amazing. Kiefer Sutherland, obviously, he does his thing. He does his Kiefer thing. I can't help but see the Lost Boys every time I see him in like an old film.
Yeah.
I just think that Jerry O'Connell. I mean, I was looking at him. I was looking at this kid, and I was like, I know this kid. Where is this kid? Who is this? Oh, that's Jerry O'Connell. And I actually said his name out loud. I was like, that's Jerry O'Connell. And I'm bad with names. Just fantastic. The writing's amazing. What a great screenplay. They don't hold back from the kids. The cinematography is beautiful. It's wide when it needs to be wide. It's intimate when it needs to be intimate. It sets up conversations really well without having to cut. There's a scene where Gordie is sleeping by the fire and Chris is keeping watch, and he notices that the fire is about to go out, and the camera is on both of them. You see them both, Gordie sleeping and Chris noticing the fire, and then Chris gets up and sneaks by the fire, puts another log on, and then Gordie wakes up. There's no edit there, right? They just leave it. You're just existing with them. There's no need to cut to add any kind of stress or anything. It is. And then eventually they cut when they go back by the tree, when Gordie gets up and goes and sits down with Chris by the tree. Just absolutely fantastic. Obviously the iconic scene of them running from the train on the tracks is great. I mean, it's the quintessential coming of age film. And me as a dad now in 2024, I'm sitting here thinking, who are these terrible parents that are just not keeping up with their kids for 2 freaking days. But, you have to remember it's in the middle of nowhere in Oregon, in a small town. Nothing crazy ever happens except for, this kid dying. Nothing crazy or going missing. Nothing crazy ever happens. And it's back in the 60s, 50s.
59. Yeah.
59. And And, there was phones, but there were no cell phones, no internet or anything like that. So you have to keep all of that in mind. And then, this film did it first. I mean, that scene you played is basically Good Will Hunting,
Yeah, that's all I thought the whole time.
It's Ben Affleck talking to Matt Damon, telling him that, if you're here if you're still here, I'm going to punch you in the face or kill you. That's basically it. But River Phoenix did it first. And honestly, he maybe did it better. I mean, it's really, really beautifully done. And then, the whole time I'm sitting here waiting for something really bad to happen to them. Cause I hadn't seen it all the way through. I'd only seen scenes, and, it was to the point where like Jenny was watching it with me and my wife, and she was getting a little stressed out. And I said, yeah, you should probably not watch it, cause I don't know what's going to happen. And if it happens, something happens to kids, like it's a big deal for me, much less her. So, she ended up, stopping watching about halfway through. When they not halfway through, but when they got to the junkyard. Also, let's just call the runtime flawless. Absolutely perfect. I was ready. I was, by the time they got to the body, I was thinking, okay, they're here now. This is kind of like, I don't know how much more we can drag this out and have it be, pointed and important. I love that Ace never gets them. In the story, he like threatens them, but they're not scared. They're not worried about it. They're just like, they stood up for themselves, and he left, and now that's gone and done. And really the story, they come to that crossroad at the end where they're leaving each other. And it's such a great metaphor for life of how, you make friends and you think you're going to be friends forever. And then things happen, you drift away, whatever. But there's things that you never forget. And of course you make more friends, but like how many friends do you really have, and I thought of you at the end when he's typing the last lines and he said, that last line of you'll never
I never had any friends like the ones I had when I was 12. Jesus, does anyone?
I do. I do. And it's you. And I so identified with that, and I loved it. And I was so thankful that I have you and a few other people. And it's so necessary at times. Even if it's just doing this, where I talk to you once a week for an hour or 3, depending on how long the damn episode goes. And it's just such a wonderful, wonderful story. Nobody dies except the kid who's already dead. Nobody dies. Nobody loses a limb. There's no like huge cost to anything, which usually I like costs to things.
Yeah. Really,
the cost is their childhood. You can see them losing their childhood as they are going down this path, and it's painful. I mean, Chris is already a grown up. He's already lost his childhood. His dad is terrible, and whatever. But so is Gordie's. Gordie's parents are just awful. His dad specifically, his mom never says a word, but his dad is terrible. They're just all awful. But I think that because Chris is so grown up, he's the parent, right? And that scene is fantastic because he's like, I would parent you, Gordie, and I would do it better. Like, calling it a spade. So perfectly written, perfectly shot, perfectly edited. The timing is fantastic and the pacing is great. I never got bored. Mm-hmm. Just enough stress happened to keep me interested, but not so much that I was like pissed off and exhausted. Absolutely flawless. It's kind of like listening to Sgt. Pepper for the first time. You're like, oh, this is where all of the music for the next 50 years came from? Got it. Okay. That's what this film felt like for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel really lucky because I did see it when I was a kid. I was maybe like 7 or so because I didn't see it in theaters. It came out in 85. And in those days, it's a nice phrase to sound 1,000 years old. But in those days, movies didn't come straight to rent. Like, it was a whole crazy process where there was exclusive rights. Okay, it played in the movies for whatever, 3 months, 6 months. I don't know how long they stayed in films. For me, it both felt like an eternity and never, because of just the nature of how often I went to the movies. But it would go play in the movies for whatever, let's say 3 months, premium, and then maybe have a run in the cheap discount theaters. And then after that, let's say it's now 6 months, it would have exclusive rights to certain distributors like Blockbuster, and they would get dibs for whatever, a year. Like, it was a really long run, time, especially in the mid 80s. In the 90s, it got a little bit shorter, but it might be a year and a half to 2 years before that movie you really wanted to see in theaters is now actually available to rent and go look at, or let alone streaming. I mean, that could be, a good solid 2, 3, 4 or 5 years before it's playing on TNT or something on TV. So all that to say, I don't know exactly when I would have been able to have watched this movie because I didn't see it in theaters. But when I do remember like watching it, and this became an absolute staple. This was one of those movies for me that I watched a lot of movies as a kid because I didn't have TV for the most part. So everything I watched on a TV was probably a movie. And every movie I knew was a movie. Like, I remember watching Aliens as whatever, a 7 or 8 year old, and thinking, man, this is what a movie should be. This is what the future is going to be. And I just remember being really profoundly impacted by Aliens. And then seeing like scary movies. Let's not get too deep into the good parenting thing that you were going on a minute ago, but I was watching like Freddy and Jason as a kid and was like, oh, that was a fun, scary movie. This was the first movie I remember watching where I felt like this isn't really a movie. This is like real life. And watching these kids, and I was like, those are my friends. I felt like I was watching my friends. I was watching kids figure out life. This, even as a 7, 8 year old, felt like, okay, this is something, I don't know, I would say that I aspired to, but something that I recognized. Because let's be honest, by the time I was 12, I was Chris Chambers. Like, that was so much of me in that age. But also just recognizing like this whole aspect of going on an adventure, running around in the woods. That was such my childhood because I grew up in the country, and no one was keeping tabs on me and my friends. Like, we were just doing whatever we wanted, go camping, out in the middle of nowhere, whatever. Like, everything, like just chaos 24/7. And for me, I love so much that this is, at the end of it, getting into the transient nature of like friendship. Because that was also me. Like, I had this friend group, and I think that's every kid, right? You have this friend group during the summer, you have another friend group during school hours, and you have a different friend group after school hours. If you go to a camp, you have friends that you meet there that last forever, even though it's whatever, 3 weeks. And so, like, in so many thousands of ways, I felt just connected deeply. Yeah, I would hesitate to like get engaged to anyone who hadn't seen this movie because they just wouldn't begin to really understand me. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's hard for me to separate myself from this movie in a lot of ways. It's so weird to watch it now as an adult. I think it's been a good 10 years since I watched it. When I was dating someone that I was like, okay, it's serious enough now. They need to have Stand By Me time. And so we'll sit and watch this movie. Like, yeah, I don't know, man. It's so funny because at the same time, I didn't recognize that this was 1959. As a kid watching this, it felt like I recognized the era was an era, but it also felt like this timeless thing that I was watching. Like, yeah, I suppose this is the 50s, but it also feels like last summer. It has that strange kind of, timelessness to it. But partially because they're out in the woods. They're not around a lot of civilization, for most of it, at least. Obviously they are at the beginning, but true. No, I think that's true. And then the music that they're listening to introduced me to those songs. Like, I was never going to know about Rockin' Robin or Lollipop. But hearing, this suddenly, me and my brother running around doing the, Lollipop sound, and singing the song, the exact amount of lyrics that are in this movie are what we were singing. Like, it's like, this is such a, to me, an amazing like staple of my childhood and the version of my life that I wanted to go on adventures, and emulate to a large degree. But to your point earlier, I also, man, they don't talk down to the kids, but I also think they do a great job of not talking over the kids. Like, they never make them feel like 20-year-olds, or have some kind of weird compendium of knowledge. That can be fun. I don't want to like poo on that whole concept, but these felt like actual 12-year-olds, as close as you can get to it without actually having a 12-year-old sit over your shoulder and help you write it. Like, you can't do that. But yeah, I think it's completely reasonable to have those 12-year-olds in 1959 smoking cigarettes, pulling pistols, and yet also arguing about who would win in the fight between Mighty Mouse and Superman. Like, that's
so good.
That's all
I love that.
accurate.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, what are your? Well, I don't have any notes. That's the thing. It's like there's not really much that other than what I said before. The pacing is great and all that stuff. Like, I don't have any other notes for it.
Magic. So I'll start with story and writing, because it'll be interesting, I think, more to end on cinematography after I've hit on some of these beats. But one, multiple threads. Like, it really helps to have so many different stories going on, because otherwise, to your point, like, how much is there for them to do on a walk? They're going on a walk, and you want to relieve us of some of that tension while providing context for other things that are happening. And so one of those obviously is just, we're already in a flashback, but then within the flashback, we're seeing flashbacks of him and his brother, right? John Cusack, who's way too old for 1985. That like messes my head up. But watching him be he is like the only truly good character in this movie. Like, he really has no flaws. Therefore, I think he needs to die. Like, I think that's the only thing that can service the story from him is just his lack of presence. Because now, how does Gordie get on without the perfect brother? How does he deal with his parents and all that kind of stuff? But the other thread that we're using, other than the flashbacks of his brother and his dad, is obviously Ace and the Cobras, which is such a perfect 80s gang name. It's like,
it is
the least threatening. If someone rolled up in a gang now and they were like, we're the Cobras, I'd be like, okay, I'm keeping my wallet. Thank you. I'll let you wash my windshield. But intercutting them with the journey on the train tracks is a very simple and great way to advance the kids' story, so that anytime it's like, okay, we've had a moment with them, let's see how their stories are going to interconnect, because you can't just let them run to the end and get to the body and then suddenly Ace pops up. That doesn't make sense. Yeah. So you want to flesh that out, but only in beats. Like, we don't need that much of Ace. Enough to see that he kind of means what he says. He's not full of it. Like, there's a lot of bad guys you run into that's like, yeah, you punch that guy one good time in the nose and he'll go, wait, that is not Ace. Ace is the guy who's not swerving from an oncoming truck. And so those little bits flesh out his character and build the threat, so that by the time he gets to the kids, we believe he really doesn't care that these are kids. He will do anything, and therefore the threat from the kids has to be that much greater. But the other utility is allowing the kids to jump forward in time. And so one of those things is whenever they have that conversation early in the film, they're arguing. This is after they see Chopper sick balls, and Teddy's having one of his breakdowns, and he's having a really tough moment reconciling his dad and all that stuff. And what does Gordie say? You know what? We're going to see a dead kid. Maybe it shouldn't be a party. And it's this real downbeat. It's a serious moment. The tone has shifted. And so we cut to Ace and his gang sitting around tattooing each other, bad tattoos. And then we cue a radio song because they're listening to the radio. We cue Lollipop. And then we come back to see Teddy and Vern are in a good mood. They're singing along. They're arm in arm. Everything's fine. And it's a really nice way. A cutaway and a music cue helps reset the mood and reset the tone. So now what do we want to do? Is it going to stay a light moment? No, we're actually going to go into another serious moment. And that, is where we get into that clip between Gordie and Chris about Gordie's dreams. Being a writer's stupid. No, that's your dad talking. And it's just a wonderful way to reset the mood so that, hey, we can get serious again. You can't just go from serious to serious. Like, let's cut the tension, circle back, and now let's have this serious conversation, which there's no shortage of in this movie, but that's what they do the entire film. We're going to intercut, break up the tension so that we can have tension again. You go away so that you can come back. And it's just a masterful job of continually doing that so that you never feel beaten over the head. You feel the weight without ever just feeling like you never get any reprieve. And that's just genius. And so that brings us to coming of age. This is a coming of age story that is really the one that set the tone for all to follow. Like, we can talk about the 400 Blows and some other films that came before it, but really this is the quintessential coming of age story. And of course, literally coming of age is all about growing up, right? What does it mean to leave childhood behind and become an adult? And I loved what you said, bro. What you said, the only cost is their childhood. Fucking brilliant. Like, yes, I'm not going to say anything better than that. Let's just get that out of the way. But let's look at some of the ways that, they do this. They accomplish this, which is confronting your parents, right? That's a huge aspect of becoming an adult. You have to clear out the people who are holding you back from being your own self. And that's your parents. That could be bullies. In this case, it's even death. And I find it interesting because part of death is embracing your mortality. And for them, where I think it actually starts is the decision to go see the dead body was rooted in, what was their big excuse? Oh, if we find the body, we might get in the newspaper. We might even get on TV. And that's really interesting because I feel like time immemorial, right? That's how we escape death, is through what we leave behind, through writing, through creating something, a work of art, through kids, and being in the newspaper. That's evidence that says, I was here, I existed. And I feel like that's the start of this whole journey, was for them to have a moment where they say to the world, we exist. And so that's really fascinating because once you get to the end of the story, they walk it back. They say, you know what? I know I exist. That's enough for me. Very fascinating.
Amazing.
So parents and family, let's discuss this whole aspect because most of these characters have a version of this that they're dealing with. Teddy, wrestling with his dad's trauma of storming the beaches of Normandy in World War II, which is interesting because that's a trauma that passed on to Teddy himself, right? Through violence and even through communal estrangement. Like, what his dad is experiencing, he's being mocked for. Like, your dad's in the loony bin, and it's just a way to get at Teddy. And Teddy wears all that. Like, he's got the violence from his dad. Now he's got the estrangement that his dad is experiencing. All for serving his country. His dad did nothing wrong. And yet we see the knock-on effects of what parents do to their kids in this one simple way. Another simple way is Chris, right? Has to live under the shadow of his family, presumed guilty before trial. He tells that brutal story of the milk money, which on its face sounds really silly. Oh, you stole milk money. But then you see, oh, it was actually a substantial amount of money. And you also see the ways that the community has judged him guilty before even giving him a chance. His dad judged him. And the nun knew. She knew he was guilty in everyone else's eyes. Therefore, she can get away with the real crime. And it's really fascinating to see how this also affects them, right? Because he gives the love he wishes he was given. He protects his friends the way he's never protected. Teddy on the tracks pulls him off. Gordie at the body, standing in front of him. And even his dreams are about failing his friends, right? In the dream, I miss him. And down he goes. Talking about Teddy, who almost fell through the bottom of the treehouse. And Gordie reminds him, but you didn't miss him. You never miss. And that's, of course, foreshadowing how his eventual death comes about. But I love it because even at the end, he even protects the dead kid himself. This is so rooted in everything he is, and it's all a result of, his own, like you said, he grew up sooner, and it was all because of, his family and things that he's wrestling with in his life on his way to adulthood. And Gordie, of course, is wrestling with the death of his brother and how it's made him invisible and an even greater disappointment to his dad. And that's a thing that he wrestles with in his own way. I think by confronting the bullies, he's able to confront his dad by effectively saying, this is the line, no one else. Vern is interesting because he's almost pure comic relief, right? He gets us into the journey and then never shuts up. Like, he says the wrong thing at the wrong time, and it helps cut tension. He's funny. Like, it's really amusing because you buy him. That performance is so good because you're like, I know that kid. I know that kid. He drives me nuts, and I'll never cut him out of my life. Like, he'll go away if he wants, but I'm okay. Like, it's just a funny thing to have that kind of guy around. And it's nice. I don't know. It's like the white noise when you're going to sleep. But what he does do, what Vern does, is he stands up to his own bully, which is Teddy. Like, it took him the whole movie before he finally said, you know what, Teddy, that's enough. And he just charges him. He starts swinging on him. And it's a funny moment, but it's also a very honest moment because that's been building up the entire trip. And that's really nice. The other thing coming of age films normally do is that it involves romance, but not here. And I love that. Here, this is all about friendship and the transient nature of friends in life. And I really do love that they don't stay close friends with Teddy and Vern, but they do stay friends with each other. And that's a really honest thing. There are friends that you do stay friends with forever. And even those can still pop in and out. But there's those friends that were just, those were your summer friends for that one time in 7th grade, between 7th and 8th, whatever. That's beautiful. And it's honest. Movies never do that anymore. It's always this same 5 group of friends have been friends since they were, born. And it's like, cool. I'm going to watch it because
that's boring.
But it is. It really is boring. And it's not honest. And I really love when I see a movie that finds a way to say, no, actually, the real friends are all these random people who glom onto you in life that you're just like, I'm not letting you go. And that's beautiful. And it's true. And I love that comment. He's like, until eventually they became just 2 more faces in the hall. Friends come and go like busboys at a restaurant. Like, that's
cool
brutal.
Because I remember that line, and I remember thinking, like, picturing that. That's what's great about that line, is that it wasn't that they never saw each other again. They did see each other every day, but they just became another face. So it's not that they went because physically they're going their separate ways. We're watching them walk away from each other, but that's not what happened. Emotionally, they walked away. Like they just were other people after this that were different, and that's okay. But it actively chose every day to let that go. Yeah. So the great line.
It's so good. It's so cool. The other thing this one wrestled with, mortality. And I think seeing Ray Brower is them facing their own mortality, right? And it's not hidden, it's pretty much right there on its face. But this whole journey was about them growing up, and the train tracks seem to represent the direction of their life. Some of them feel like they're on a track. They cannot break. And when they deviate, things go wrong. Every time they're on the train track, actually, everything kind of goes right. I mean, even the near-death experience, they're fine. Like, it was close, but you know what? We're still on the right track. When they stepped off, leeches. Everyone's trying to take from them. And I think that's childhood in a nutshell. Like, you stay on your track that everyone has laid for you. Yeah, everything's going to be fine. And you get off the track, you know what? You might run into some leeches, but it won't be boring. And it'll be your own choice at the end of the day. And I love that. This whole film was just a journey for them to look their own mortality in the face and choose to keep going anyway. And what's fascinating about all of that is they point out in the movie, they get back home the day before Labor Day. And Labor Day is, I don't know, it's a celebration of, everyone who works, and it's a concept as much as it's based on something in real life. But for them, I think symbolically, it means life starts tomorrow. Like it's when they really get to work and become adults. And that's past. Their childhood is past, which is the other interesting thing about placing this in 1959. Like, I feel like the 60s were the start of a whole new version of America. And there was so much turbulence. The 60s were nuts. Every time I read about the 60s, it just blows my mind how freaking nuts it was. Like bombings every 1 or 2 weeks in New York. I mean, it's crazy. And so placing this in the 50s, where everything, on the outside, especially for white America, looked rosy. Like everything was lollipop on the radio and, hanging out with your friends and mowing the lawn. Like in the 60s were anything but. It's drugs and rock and roll and yada, yada. And so placing it in 1959, I thought was a really interesting decision. So that brings me into some of the cinematography. It's all beautiful. They find so many great shots to show you the countryside, along with how that intersect with their journey with the train tracks. And so at the beginning, they're on a road and they give you this crazy wide angle. Huge. The kids are like ants in the frame. And they're way, way down at the bottom of the frame. We have this beautiful hill we see it crest at the top of the screen, and they are way down at the bottom of the frame. And then same thing when they're walking across the bridge, way, we are super wide. It's like an Ansel Adams shot, and they are way at the top. The train tracks are way at the top, almost at the very, very top edge of the frame. And what I love about this is not the rule of thirds. It's not an effect. And I think the rule of thirds get overblown a little bit. I'm not saying it's a bad framing device. It is a good framing device. But people talk about it in this way that it's this magical thing. And they're like, notice how I placed this at the exact lower right third. And then you look at the composition and you're like, that's not where Deakins is placing them. It's in the area of the lower right third. It's not directly exactly on the lower right third. People, I think, overblow that. Don't even get me started on the golden ratio, which is the biggest load of shit I've ever seen. Like,
thank you.
Don't use anything based on the golden ratio. That's insanity. Anyway, yeah. So the rule of thirds, great device for just thinking about your frame and composition. But don't be married to it. You can find some really beautiful frames. And I think Stand By Me is a really good example. They're all over the place. They're dead centering people. They're giving nice coverage and all kinds of compositions. And some of them, sure, rule of thirds seem to be in effect, but they're certainly not like married to it. And I don't think you should be either. Like, just play with the composition that feels right. Spend as little, once you are aware of that kind of thing, the rule of thirds, do what you can to forget it.
Yeah. Because
you're aware of it. Now just place things where it feels right to your eye. And I think you'll walk away with a much better composition, in my opinion. Anyway, so the other cool thing that I really like about that train track moment is when they're walking across that really long track. And I love this scene, right? They barely escape death. Again, this whole thing is one nice journey of facing your mortality. That's one of them. And what's nice is 3 things. They create a really great amount of tension here. And one of them is through knowing one kid's already died from being struck by a train, right? This world is not safe. And so that already creates some tension. And then on top of that, we've already seen someone try to dodge a train, and it gives a little bit of sense of, okay, he didn't really dodge it. He wasn't close enough for it to be a dodge, but that's also just a really dumb concept. Like, you can't dodge a train. You either get out of the way or you don't. Like, there's no contest here. Like,
you're not playing chicken. You're not going to win. Yeah.
And so, they've managed to create tension through those 2 moments of describing this kid who probably died by a train. And then, the moment with Teddy and Chris. The other nice thing, and this is just amazing, is fantastic compositing. Like, compositing here is outstanding, because you really will think these kids are on a train track with the train the entire time. And they're not. Like, there might be one shot where they go really, really, really long lens, and then like have the kids 100 feet and then just have the train slowly creeping or something. And then that way the compression, because you're so far away and the lens is so long, it makes it look like the train's right on top of them, even though it's nowhere near them. There's really clever ways to do that through lens choice and composition. But they also, those compositings where they're making it look like through two different shots, they're blending two different shots of the kids jumping off the track and the train zooming by. That's a composite. But it doesn't feel like a composite because of how tight the editing is in those sections. Like, they don't hang out on that compositing for very long. They give you the exact moments of when they're dodging the train and then cutting out. Let's move away, so that you never feel the composite take place. It's happening too fast. It just feels real. And it's beautiful. If you freeze frame it, you're like, oh, yeah, that's a composite. If you don't, you're like, oh my God, did they have those kids on my track? It's beautiful. Just incredible cinematography and visual effects work.
Back in mid 80s, no digital.
80s.
Yeah.
No, sir.
Somebody's cutting film,
Yeah, that's hardcore. Yeah, I think that's about it that I have as far as notes. Question to you: how much of this story rings a bell for you? Like, do you have memories of like those kinds of friends or adventures as a tweener?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I have friends' stories. Like, I'm not friends with any of my friends from school. A lot of them on purpose. Some of them not. It just happened. I'm still acquaintances on social media sometimes from time to time or whatever, but that's, yeah, I mean, I didn't grow up like this at all. It was the opposite of, not the opposite, but, I would ride my bike down the street to my friend's house, or to the other side of the neighborhood. But like never really leave the neighborhood very much, by myself, growing up. And, I mean, my parents kept tabs on me and, like but if anything happened, like I was the Chris Chambers version. I was like the one taking care of people if somebody got hurt, or like, telling people don't climb that fence or whatever. I was like the parent. So I wouldn't say that like their experience was an experience that I had. It's an experience I wish I would have had. It would have been wonderful to have that kind of freedom, growing up. Of course, I'm not giving that to my kids, not now. So it's not the end of the world if you don't have it. But yeah, the friend thing, I remember being friends with some kids in junior high, and then in grade school, and then we would go up to middle school, and we went to the same middle school, but we were still in the same school, but we just didn't really talk to each other. It was something different after the summer, and then in high school, even if we went to the same high school, it was a little bit different. And I think, when you're young and you have friends that complement where you are in your life, and you complement them. And if you're in a similar place, then you're friends. But as you grow into who you are, that will evolve and change. Of course it will. And unless they evolve and change in the same way, you're going to kind of start growing apart, or just, avoiding each other from time to time. And that definitely happened with me for sure. I think it's happening with my son. He's 11 now, and there are some friends he played with every day that he's like, I don't really want to play with him anymore, like things like that. And, so it's recognizable in those terms for me. Yeah.
That's really cool.
But for you, this was your,
we did everything but find a dead body.
Okay. As long as you didn't cause the dead body, that's okay.
Yeah, I probably overall relate more between like Gordie and Teddy. Like, I wasn't as crazy as Teddy, but depending on the group, I would maybe be the crazy one. And maybe depending on the group, I might be like the smaller one, depending on the age and era. Because every summer was different. Every school year was a little different, but I ran in all kinds of different groups. As a 12-year-old, I was running with 21-year-olds and, acting wild. I don't know. It was a crazy time
one thing
growing up in the 90s.
That you mentioned something earlier about Chris and about how the town judged him, right? And it kind of like stirred something in me. I think I judged his character too. At the very beginning, when we're sitting when the first time we see him, when we're in the clubhouse, the treehouse, he's got the pack of cigarettes in his sleeve, and he's just like got this air of the leader, and maybe it's from seeing a bunch of other movies and that are kind of like similar, whatever. I'm thinking, this is the bad influence of the group, right? It's going to lead them to do something that they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
And maybe that's true only because, he's like, no, let's go, and kind of like leads them. But it turns out to be an adventure and not something bad. And while they're on it, while they're on this journey, even before that, when he stands up to Ace for that first time in front of on the sidewalk, you're kind of thinking, oh, and then Chris and Gordie are walking away, and Chris kicks Gordie in the butt. You're sitting there, you're like, oh, I completely misjudged this kid. This kid he's a protector. He's I'm gonna lay down in the middle of the road for you kind of guy. And it got me, it got me to thinking, oh, let's not judge so quickly,
That's so good.
Yeah.
The other like little fun moments for me in this film are the Barfarama, which was a staple. Like we talked about that a lot as a kid, and we named everything else Orama. So like if we had a thing going on, it was Orama. And what I really love watching it now as an adult is he finishes the story and the critics start chirping up like, he should go home and like shoot his dad. Like, Jesus Christ.
Come on, Teddy.
And then you have Vern, who's like, I loved it, but just one thing. Did Lardass have to pay to get into the contest?
It has nothing to do.
Yeah, it's like, that's such a great like writer thing to insert. Like people who are like watching your films or reading your stories who are going off on things that's like, that is so not the point of anything.
Yeah, that's probably half of all our episodes.
That's probably true. Where if one of these, God forbid, filmmakers actually listen to us, they'd be like, oh, dude, what are y'all talking about that for?
Yeah.
But the other thing, another little moment that I love is after camping out the night, they're walking and Vern starts, complaining, Vern again. And he's like, couldn't you get anything other than like marshmallows and this and that? And Gordie slaps him with, I'm sorry, Vern. I guess a more experienced shopper could have gotten more out of your 7 cents.
Yes. So perfect. That is a great comeback line. I'm so glad they gave it to Gordie too.
Yes. The dry wit that Gordie spits out throughout the film is just so good.
So good.
Yeah. I love it, man. I think, is there any other little random note I'm going to pick through? One, this is random, but I thought it was interesting. Denny was killed in a Jeep accident 4 months before, their story starts. And what's interesting about that is I looked it up, and there's like a Jeep from 1959 that looks a lot like the Jeep at the beginning of the film that the writer's sitting in when he starts flashing back and remembering the story at the beginning. And it's like, oh, that's interesting. It's like he's still trying to connect with his brother even ages later. That's really cool.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. And I mean, there's this other line of dialogue whenever he's buying their food with their whatever 98 cents. And the guy asks him this very simple question, like, and what do you do? And the kid's like, and Gordie is like, I don't know. And it's just that's the entire movie is who are you? what are you going to do with your life? It's just
Yeah.
reinforced the whole way through. And he gets to that moment with the deer crossing the track. And I love, saves it for himself. This one's for me. Doesn't even share it with Chris. That's so beautiful. That's a moment of realizing some things are just for me.
Yeah.
Cool.
Incredible. And then the last shot of him leaving, turning off his computer, leaving to go take his kids to the pool or wherever it is they're going. And, he could do it like frustrated, but instead we look through the window and he grabs him, gives him a hug as they walk to the car, and then they drive away. He's fixing. He's fixing the broken, the pattern, yeah.
I've never spotted that. That's such a great point.
Yeah.
I won't add anything.
It's what you'll do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And my wife talks about it all the time because she had a rough childhood too, in a lot of ways, and so she's very cautious to make sure that doesn't happen to her kids, and I that's maybe one of the good things that comes out of having a troubled childhood or whatever, is that you're really, what not to do. And a lot of times we say as parents, like, I don't know what I'm doing, and yeah, it's right, but you know what not to do. You might not know the next right thing to do, but not to do X and Y and Z or whatever, especially if it happened to you, because you know how it felt. Yeah. And he does it's a great, and they never roll to black. They just stay on this shot. The Jeep drives away and we just stay here while the credits roll. And I think it's just so beautiful. You're just like hanging out in the house while they're gone, and you can just imagine the laughter and the fun that they're having, like as a father and son, which he didn't have with his dad. His dad was like total shithead. So yeah, so it's such a great way to end a film like this.
Great way. And what's crazy is when I think about the ending, I always hear him say, "Jesus, does anyone?" In my head, I hear it all the time. And so watching the film, it's like, whoa, he just types it. And we hear him say it.
Oh, you didn't remember he typed it. You thought he said it.
I thought he said it out loud. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, that makes sense because he's narrating the whole time. So
the whole time,
except for when we see him typing at the end. Yeah. Awesome.
God.
So good.
Yeah. And Richard Dreyfuss just there's no false steps in this movie. Like I love it so dearly. And I'm so glad you do too.
Yeah, man. This is fantastic. And it's definitely something I could go back and rewatch easily. The rewatchability of this film is fantastic, And I imagine if I watched it 10 times, I'd probably find 10 more things to talk about, So
agreed. Like it's wild because I watched it a couple days ago and sat down a few hours ago to sit and take notes, and I didn't really find anything. I just kept getting pulled right back into it, and I was like,
yeah,
I have no doubt I could watch it again tomorrow and just be right there with it still. That's
Hollywood
performance.
Runtime 127.
Every minute counts. Every minute counts.
It does. Stop giving me 2.5 hour movies that I don't need. Give me an hour 45 max. Like, that's okay. Cut out the fluff and bullshit.
Yes.
Nothing wrong with that. Just because you shoot it doesn't mean it needs to be in the damn movie.
Yep.
Anyway, this is
Discipline.
a great lesson of storytelling and minimalism. So
100%.
Yeah.
Great. So, what are you going to recommend this week, man?
How have we not recommended Boyhood before? How have we not done it? I don't know. I went and looked. I'm like, I triple checked. I'm like, we didn't cover it. We haven't recommended it. But like, it's weird. I'm going to recommend Boyhood. Linklater shot it over 12 years, span of 12 years or something.
God, that's crazy.
That's where, for a couple of weeks a year or a month a year, they would just get together and film. And a lot of times there was no script. And it's just such a brilliant way to make a film. Brilliant and patient and loving way to make a film. And I'm going to recommend Boyhood.
Nice. I'm going to go with another indie king. Steven Soderbergh made a film in the early 90s called King of the Hill. And it's amazing. It's set in like the 30s or the 40s. It's about a kid who is, I don't know, abandoned or left by his parents. But he's in a hotel alone, trying to survive and also not get kicked out because they're trying to kick him out. And I just remember stumbling into this movie on like cable at a hotel one night and was just like enthralled. I was like, why have I never heard of this? And it's just fantastic. So yeah, King of the Hill. Hopefully it's streaming somewhere. But anyway, stay tuned for next week. We watched one that you hadn't fully seen, and now we're going to watch one that I haven't fully seen. And we're going to take a look at American Psycho. I hear that's a hoot and a half. And so,
it's comedy, right?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I think I have an idea, but TBD. So, American Psycho next week. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, subscribe, drop us a review, leave us a note. If there's something you want us to talk about, kind of things you find interesting. Yeah, we'll show you where the dead body is. And if you want to leave a note on this episode, you can do that at thepestpodcast.com/standbyme.
And our quote of the day today is from the legendary Stephen King from The Body. That's the worst, I think, when the secret stays locked within, not for want of a teller, but for want of an understanding ear. I just, man, that hits hard right now. Yes, it almost doesn't matter if you say it out loud if nobody really hears it or understands it or wants to hear it in the first place. So,
or if you just don't trust anyone,
or that,
with it.
Yeah. Great point.
I feel like that's a direct. The Body is the novella that he wrote that Stand By Me is based on, of course. And so obviously it fits perfectly here because that's what all these kids are kind of struggling with. Teddy never really opens up, but Chris does. Chris opens up to Gordie, and Gordie opens up to Chris. Like, that's such a cool thing. Chris is the dad of the group, but he's not above whatever, being vulnerable. Very nice. God.
What we want.
But I love that he gets vulnerable and then he kind of cuts himself down for it, right? He's like, I guess I'm the, female part now.
Yeah.
And no one's thinking that.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Man, wow. Fantastic. Yeah. Love the quote. Love the film. Just wonderful. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. I know I really did. I can't wait to go watch it again, honestly. If you liked this episode, please subscribe, review us wherever you get your podcast, wherever you are finding us. It all helps. Recommend us to a friend, and if there's a film that you'd like to see us pick apart, please let us know what that would be. Who knows? Maybe one day we will cover it. Maybe. Until next time, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.
His face, Teddy, Vern's face when he's running is just
so good.
It's so amazing. He's such a good actor.
And I love that Gordie doesn't leave him behind. Like, Teddy lays down on the tracks. He's like, I'm done. That's it. I'm done. He's like, no, get the fuck up.
We're gonna die. Those performances are like, I really believe they are freaking terrified of dying right now.
Yeah, that's why it's such a famous fucking scene, man. Jeez. So good. So good.